Alright, so the goal with this video for me is to say, hey, I've got some replays. How well did I do in these games? What things did I do well? What things could I do better? Today's video, I wanted to try out a team with Mienshao. Mienshao is in BL Purgatory, and I don't think it's good in OU, but if it's stuck being only usable in OU, I might as well try it out and see how it does. I got 3 replays to go through, and you'll notice if I scroll over my name that I am at the bottom of the ladder, and that is what you should expect on this channel. I'm not the best player of the game, and I mostly like to use really bad teams, so I'm not going to be able to get very high on the ladder. But that being said, if you like the bottom of the ladder and all the chaos that goes on there, then maybe this will be something you're interested in. So this first game, the first thing I note is that Zapdos is a problem for my team. Although Zapdos can't really switch into a lot of mons on my team, it doesn't really, I don't have any switch-ins for it either. Lando is defensive on this team, so fortunately it can eat a hit, but what can Lando do back really? I originally had Weather Ball on this Lando, but then I was never clicking it. If I had Weather Ball, it might have helped against the Zapdos, but I instead went with Stone Edge, and Stone Edge, it never hits, and it's going to be neutral against Zapdos anyway. So Zapdos is a problem for this team. Right on team preview, I decide, let me slow that back down. I decide to lead off with Mienshao because Mienshao has a decent speed tier, and I can see what he's going to do. Immediately, however, we can see that he goes for Volt Switch, which indicates to me, of course, that he's Choice Scarf, and that also tells me that, hey, maybe your idea that, wow, your speed tier is so good isn't necessarily the greatest, because obviously Choice Scarf wrote him a speed too, and that's something you should have considered, seeing as how that is basically the only other mon on his team that he could have that would be fast, so should have considered that. However, I get out of there lucky, because instead of Hydro Pumping me, he decides to Volt Switch, and I do have Regenerator, so it's not that big of a deal. Now, generally with Mienshao, one of the big problems I think it has is that it likes to click knockoff a lot, and it doesn't like to click close combat a lot, and as a result, it never gets stabbed on its moves. I click knockoff here, and we're able to KO the Slowbro, so I'm pretty glad about that. No shenanigans today. Now, of course, the Rotom's going to come back in because it knows that it's going to outspeed me, and as an easy KO, I only have one ground type, which of course Rotom Wash does not care at all about Lando, and so he says, hey, what are you going to do? Well, I don't have a great play, but I figure he's going to go for the electric move. I'd like to go into Arc Result. However, maybe if I'd gone into Lando, that would have been better, because what is Lando doing against this team? It's not really doing that well against Snorlax or Corby. It can U-turn on Eggy, but that's about it. And against Rotom, it can't touch it. So I could have just gone in to see if he would go for the Volt Switch. That might have been a smarter play, because my Arc Result doesn't have his speed up, and so that just invites in Zapdos again. So really, that was a misplay on my part. Seeing how the Zapdos came in, I have to go into my Lando to give it the +1, and that's a problem. But fortunately he does close combat, and then for whatever reason, instead of going for 2-hit KO, or the close to 2-hit KO, he decides to switch. I Stone Edge, and we see the Stone Edge misses. Of course that doesn't matter on the Corviknight per se, but of course if he had gone for another close combat, then he would have been -2. That Stone Edge would have done a decent chunk. Maybe that's why he didn't want to stay in. And if it had missed, I would have been sad there, is the main thing. Alright, of course I'm not going to stay out on the Corviknight. I didn't get to see if it has Rocky Helmet, but I take the risk and I U-turn out. Going to Mienshao, to be honest, I don't really remember why I went into the Mienshao. Maybe a better play would have been going into Ninetales, because Ninetales is good for setting up the hail, but it may have been that I thought, hey, I can get a knockoff on something, Or maybe I just felt like sacking the Mienshao in case he decided to Brave Bird for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why I did that particular play. I knock off those, so now Corby doesn't have his leftovers. And this, I think, is one of the misplays that my opponent made. Here, he decides to bulk up, and I say, okay, that's cute. Let me U-turn out into my Magna Zone. Now, if he had body pressed here, that would have been a problem for me. But fortunately, he decided to Brave Bird, and because of that, now he's trapped with me. He does not outspeed me, and I can kill him from that range. I think even if he split off. Okay, goes into Eggy here. I want to keep around the Magna Zone because it does decently against his Rotom, and if the Zapdos decides to lock into Brave Bird, it still is useful. The Ninetales, however, obviously in theory beats this and is really only useful for setting up Hail at this point, so I'll go hard into it to get that Hail up. Goes for Leech Seed, which is a really passive play. If I'd have stayed in, what would he have gone from that? Obviously, he 4 times resists me, so it's not that big of a deal. But unless he is Spadef, I don't know if he knows that I'm Specs, and I could have gone for Iron Defense or Flash Cannon or Volt Switch even. So I don't really know what he got out of that Leech Seed. Whatever, it's the bottom of the ladder. Let's not think too hard about it. Of course, now this is another play that I could have predicted this play. Here, he's going to go Snorlax. Of course, it's the bottom of the ladder. You don't really necessarily want to predict. You want to click what's right in front of you. And he has 3 mons that are weak to the ice move, so I'm going to click the ice move. But if I'd been a bit higher up on the ladder, maybe I would have predicted this. Should I have predicted it? I'm not really sure. In any case, it goes into his thick, fast Snorlax, doesn't take anything. Takes a little bit of chip, but it's immediately healed back by the Leech Seed. I go hard into Mienshao. Why do I do this? Well, I figure, hey, he's... what does Mienshao do? The Rotom is at full health, so close combat from non-life form Mienshao is not going to do too much. The Zapdos doesn't care too much, and the Exeggutor, if he doubles into it, of course that's nice, but other than that, Mienshao doesn't do terribly well against it, I suppose. So I might as well just toss it in to see what the Snorlax wants to do. Takes an Earthquake. I get sort of lucky on that point because it doesn't one-shot me. If he'd gone for a stronger move like, I don't know, Double Edge or whatever, I guess it would have. The Hail doesn't take me out, so I get to switch out or I get to close combat. I decide to switch out because I figure he's not going to stay in. I get to go back into my Ninetales. I believe this time I do predict him, and so now I get to go into my Mienshao. Now, again, if he had gone into the Snorlax, I would have been in a great position, but he didn't go into the Snorlax into his Rotom. I know that he outspeeds me. We've been in this position twice before. This time, however, I'm in a bit stronger position to go into Arctisol. Once again, he Volt Switches, which is a really passive play, but he doesn't think about the Hail and the Slush Rush, and I just knock out his Zapdos. And at this point, the game is basically over, because unless he does some really cheeky stuff with his Snorlax, I should be fine. He decides to go into that Snorlax, but then he times out, so we don't get to see how that plays out. Overall, I think I did okay in this game, but I really think that my opponent didn't take advantage of the momentum that I allowed him, and that if he had played it better, that I would have had a much harder time. Alright, let's go into the second game. The second game was a really scary game, and similar to the Zapdos in the last game, the main thing I noticed is that my team has nothing at all for Buzzwole. Buzzwole can Roost, it has Ice Punch for Lando, Close Combat / Earthquake for Heatran, Magnezone, Arctisol. Mienshao does not have Aerial Ace, so it can't touch it, and the Ninetales can do something to it, but not really that much because Freeze Dry is really weak coming off of Ninetales, and the Ninetales does not have Moonblast. So maybe this team would be better if I got rid of Mienshao and had something on it for Buzzwole. No. Okay. Let's go back. Okay, so I lead off with Lando, The reason I lead off with Lando is because I'm fearing the Melmetal lead, and I don't want him to lead Melmetal into my expected Ninetales, so I lead off with Lando. He leads off with Slowbro. I decide to U-turn out to see if he has a Rocky Helmet. He does not. I go into Magnezone, and the reason I go into Magnezone is because he really has nothing for my Magnezone. If he decides to teleport, of course that could be an issue, but if he goes into Garchomp, I have Lando, and I have other options like Ninetales. If he decides to Future Sight, well, he could go hard into his Garchomp, but I could predict that and go for Flash Cannon. That will take a hefty chunk. So Magnezone is a fairly decent play. I don't want to get Scald Burned on my Arctozolt, at least not at this point in the game. And nothing else in my team really likes the Slowbro. If I was predicting him to stay in, I could also go for the Ninetales, and then not care about the burn necessarily, and I could get off a Freeze Dry, but I felt like that was too passive because it allowed in the Melmetal, and the Magnezone doesn't really let in the Melmetal. So he does go for Scald. He does not get the burn, fortunately, and he goes into Garchomp. I decide to Volt Switch here because, once again, we are on the bottom of the ladder. My opponent is not even 1200, and I'm barely 1200. So I don't know how he's going to play. If he decides to be cheeky and stay in with Slowbro, I'd prefer to have a Slowbro dead. So I decide to Volt Switch. I see he makes the good play, so he knows sort of what he's doing. I decide to go hard into Ninetales, and he sets up Stealth Rock. One big problem this team has is that it has absolutely no hazard control, and that's something that would definitely want to be fixed. Get rid of the Mienshao, put on something better for fighting types, and something that could actually get rid of the rocks. I don't know what that would be. Maybe we could play around with that if I'm feeling like it later. Anyway, I decided to go hard into Ninetales because I don't like necessarily going into Lando on the Garchomp, especially because I feel like I need the Lando for the Melmetal. So I decided to go hard into Ninetales. At least if I die, I'll get up the hill. Now I expect him to try to go for Fire Fang or to switch into something like the Melmetal. So I decided to go into Mienshao, predicting that, and my opponent chose to Protect. And this is something that I should have taken into consideration. If I see Stealth Rock and Protect on a Garchomp, I should assume that it's Tank Chomp, and all Garchomps carry Earthquake, of course, so I can expect that. And then it's just a question as to what is the last move. Well, Tank Chomp can run Rest, it can run a Fire move, and those are generally the two main options. My Heatran is Air Balloon, and so if I had recognized that, I could have known that my Heatran indefinitely walls this Garchomp, and I could have gone hard into it, but I wasn't thinking about it. And so as a result, I decide to stay in and get off a knockoff. I figure the Buzzwole is coming in anyway, and at least if I can knock off the Rocky Helmet or the leftovers, I'll either take down his longevity or I'll make it so that later on I don't take Rocky Helmet from it. Since I'm Regenerator, I don't really care about taking Rocky Helmet chip. It is Rocky Helmets, this is good, and I can freely U-turn out. He doesn't have any like static or anything, and if I take rough skin from the Garchomp, that's not that big of a deal. I recognize that I have nothing for Buzzwole, and I recognize that my opponent recognizes I have nothing for Buzzwole. Now, since he switched out turn 1, I assume that he sort of knows what he's doing, and I decided to play a little bit risky here and protect the Ice Punch on my Lando slot, and he does do that. Now, I have to keep this in the back of my head, and now that I've done this, my opponent knows that I know how to predict, and he'll be trying to play it more safe in the future to try to punish my predictions. But at least for this turn, I get out lucky, and this time I believe I do predict the Melmetal to come in. No, I don't. I decided to Freeze Dry. Why did I decide to Freeze Dry there? Probably because I was panicking about the Buzzwole, and I figured, oh no, I need to kill this somehow. In any case, I'm once again in this position where I have to predict against the Melmetal. I decide, okay, even if this Melmetal has Ice Punch, well, I just showed that I'm willing to switch predicting the Ice Punch, so he'll probably go for a double Iron Bash, and I believe that is what he does. Again, on a bulky Lando. Unfortunately, it crits me on the second one. It is what it is. And we don't see the leftovers. I click the EQ because I say, well, I need this Melmetal dead as well, and this Lando is what I was saving it for, so I might as well try to get the leftovers, or I might as well try to get the EQ damage off. Unfortunately, it goes into slow bro, but I mean that was the right play for him to go for. This time I believe I do go, no, I had to go into the Mienshao. He goes for Scald, which is a good play. Fortunately, he does not burn, so he's 0 for 2. I go for knockoff again, just in case he decides to stay in. I know I can always U-turn out against the Buzzwole. I go into Lando this time because it's such low health, it's not going to do much. And now I can just click knockoff, no, Stealth Rock, sorry. And that sort of works out for me because this is this weird Leech Life set. Every once in a while, I think Leech Life can be fun on Buzzwole, but generally I don't think it's the best option. I think I prefer Ice Punch, Close Combat, Roost, and then Earthquake some of the time, or Toxic some of the time. Leech Life is a fine option, but obviously it does not work out here for my opponent. I'm getting up Suicide Stealth Rock because I'm at such low health. I can't really check anything anymore. Might as well get up Rocks. And now I'm going to get Stone Edge off, I believe, because, hey, he's probably going to take me off this turn, and this will leave him at lower health than he would have been otherwise. He gets an attack beast boost, which is sort of funny. Now I have to take a risk here. My Ninetales can't really touch the Buzzwole, and I don't want to sack it. And the Arctozolt is not going to outspeed, most likely, because I don't have the hail up. The Mienshao, of course, can't touch it, and the Magnezone is definitely not going to outspeed it. So I have to hope that my Heatran, which is modest, but is offensive, is going to outspeed the Buzzwole, and that he switches out. It's possible that he just knew that I was going to be offensive, and that he knew that he was going to be outsped by offensive. That's why he switched out. And this is one of the reasons why I really love Eruption Heatran right now, because you can see that the Eruption Heatran is able to 2-hit KO the Slowbro on the switch in, even though it's not a full health. Now at this point, once again, I should have known that my Heatran would wall the Garchomp. The opponent obviously knows that my Heatran walls his Garchomp, but I guess he's hoping that I switch out, and I do. And I get Toxic on my Mienshao for the trouble, I believe, here. No, I don't. I U-turn out into Ninetales, and that's what gets Toxic. That's right. Okay. He Toxics the Ninetales, and once again, he's probably going to go into Melmetal here. And I decide to Aurora Veil, because I suppose I could have come in one more time, but I was figuring I'd prefer to sack my Ninetales to the Garchomp and let my Arctozolt come in. Unfortunately, my opponent decides not to do that. At this point, I can't switch into Stealth Rock, so I just have to go for the freeze. I do not get the freeze, which, fair enough. And now I decide to go into Mienshao, because what is my Mienshao doing other than scaring out this Melmetal? That being said, the opponent is not scared out, and so I have to go into Magnezone. I go into Magnezone, predicting the double Iron Bash, and that's fine, he does that. Now I know he's probably going to have Earthquake, because I believe this is Assault Vest, and it looks like it is, so I go out into my Heatran predicting the Earthquake, and this is actually a really play on my part. At this point, I know that my Heatran walls the Garchomp, because I have the Air Balloon. If I allow my Air Balloon to get popped because my opponent decides to double Iron Bash or whatever, then I lose that advantage, and I don't really have too much for a tank Garchomp once my hail goes away. So this was a really risky play. Of course, we can see here that it pays off, but it might have been better to not make that play. Now, that being said, maybe sacking something else was not a great play either, and maybe I had to make this play. I'm not sure about this one. In any case, at this point, my opponent really has no switches in to my Heatran. He switches in to my Eruption with his Garchomp, but I recognize at this point that he cannot touch me, so I'm not really caring. Here he goes for Protect to waste some PP or be annoying or whatever. I go Earth Power on his Protect. And then I go for Magma Storm, I believe, because I figure, hey, if I trap him in with me, that's all good. I go for Magma Storm, he misses. Of course he does. I figured, go for Earth Power. Gotta be safe against this Melmetal. He goes into Dragapult. At this point, I do not want to lose my balloon, because I know this Garchomp is still somewhat of an issue, especially now the hail is gone. Might as well save my balloon, even though technically a lot of Spadef Heatrans can do some stuff to Dragapult. I don't really have anything to touch it, I don't have Dragon Pulse or anything, so I would not get anything by staying in. It would be better to sack something. So I decided to sack my Magnezone because my Magnezone is pretty low health, and at this point I can go into my Arctozolt, which is full health because I've got the heavy duty boots, and I can punish it if I hit. Fortunately I do, and if I hadn't hit, I would have lost the game right there. At this point I can go into Mienshao, because what is Mienshao doing against this team? This Mienshao is pretty trash, and I'll just Stone Edge until he kills me. Fortunately he decides not to risk, decides to just go hard for close combat, which suits me just fine because I wanted this Mienshao dead anyway. Has not done anything. Gets the attack raise. Once again I have to risk outspeeding with Heatran, but since he switched out last time, it's getting more safe to assume that that's fine. And since he's -1 Spadef and I still am a Heatran, this offensive Eruption is going to scare him out. I go for Eruption, it does not too much to the Garchomp. Once again, I know I outspeed. Once again, I predict him to protect, so I'm going to go for the Earth Power because I don't want to waste PP. And here I'm going to go for Magma Storm because I say, well, might as well throw off whatever. If it goes Corviknight, I don't want to lose Eruption PP. Fortunately, that works out for me. And at this point, the game is basically over. I have to calc this, but Eruption still does like one-shot Buzzwole, which is pretty crazy to me. Here, I decide to go for Taunt because I don't want any nonsense happening. I know that he's probably Earthquake last move, but I just would rather not have him stall me out and be annoying with Protects on my Earth Power. And bizarrely, I get a crit here, and so I don't even have to worry about stalling me out with Leftovers recovery. And that's that game. On to the last one. Alright, this game is still pretty low ladder. It's not like I'm just winning these back to back. I don't have the greatest GXC, unfortunately. So leading off here, hit this normal again. Leading off here, I say, alright. The Melmetal, of course, again, I'm scared that they're going to lead Melmetal because I have clearly a Hail team, or at least a Hail core, and I figure, hey, if they lead Melmetal, that's a problem for me. So I'm going to lead off with something that beats Melmetal. In this case, it's Heatran, and my opponent just stays in. I don't know what they were thinking, but that works for me. I Eruption there because I'm not at all worried about Heatran, unless the Heatran has Body Press or Heavy Slam, and is also on a balloon. I wall it just as well as it walls me, so it's not really a skin off my back if his Heatran comes in. And if he's not on a balloon, then he can't even stay in on me, so I'm safe to hit Click or Eruption. And for the past year or so, I've really loved Balloon Heatran, and it's the one I usually run just for situations like that. Now Dragonite comes in and I don't want to stay in. This is still useful for lots of things. Ninetale, this is going to break the multi-scale just by switching in. And then this is where I get blown back by a Fire Punch. Was not predicting that. Now if he was offensive Dragonite, I don't... maybe I would have killed him with Freeze Dry. I think I might have, because I broke the multi-scale. But I was not predicting Fire Punch. Dual Wing Beat, Earthquake, something like that is more what I was expecting. Maybe Dual Wing Beat, Ice Punch, but not the Fire Punch. Down I go. However, I can go hard into Arctozolt because at +1 I still outspeed him at +2 in the Hail, and he decides once again to stay in for whatever reason. Here I have the Stomping Tantrum, and this is one of the most disappointing parts about Arctozolt. I'm max attack, and that Stomping Tantrum is 4 times super effective, and it's still not killing the Heatran, which is sort of sad, but it does get a lot off on the Heatran, and the Heatran doesn't really kill me back. However, this is a weird interaction. Stomping Tantrum to me sounds like, hey, I'm stomping the ground because I'm mad, but apparently I'm stomping my opponent, and so it's a contact move, and I get burned by Flame Body. I'm not particularly sold on the Flame Body tech in Sword and Shield. I like it fine in BDSP, but not in Sword and Shield, but my opponent gets rewarded for running that tech, and I am now burned and basically useless. I Bolt Beak here because it's safe and it will kill still. And at this point my opponent decides to go Toxapex. I'm burned, might as well stay in, just sack this, I don't care. But at this point, I figure, hey, he's just going to recover off. I go for one more Bolt Beak, but I see that he's going to recover off, so I decide to hard switch into Magnezone, predicting that because he's shown Gunk Shot, and that's not going to do much. Magnezone versus Tapu Koko is sort of funny because I am not at all afraid of Tapu Koko. He's got to switch out. I decide to click Thunderbolt on the Rillaboom slot. That is fine by me. I can just sack this Arctozolt that I saved earlier. Now here I go into Lando because I need to get off the Intimidate, and I can click U-turn even though it's going to Grassy Glide. I need to get off the Intimidate so that my Mienshao can come in and live. As bulky as Mienshao might appear to be sometimes, usually he is not. Mostly that's in draft, I feel like that happens. And so he needed that Intimidate to live. Fortunately now, he has Regenerator and so he has a bit of health. I decide to go hard into Magnezone for a couple reasons. First of all, I do not care if I get Skull Burned. Second of all, my Earthquake of course is not going to do anything. If you have Painful Bunkers, then this also gives me more offensive presence. There's no reason for me to stay in. And so now, at this point, I can just click Thunderbolt. I don't care what my opponent does. And in fact, by not switching out, he allows me to get Electric Terrain, and with the Electric Terrain boost and a crit, I am able to one-shot him. That of course did not matter. He was not doing any damage to me, and I would have easily two-shot him. So those are some games I wanted to show off today. This is just the first try for a video like this. My goal of these, instead of doing them live, is to go back, give some commentary, both to myself in the future, so that I can go back and say, hey, gotta watch out for this, hey, gotta watch out for that. And it's just a way to practice on the ladder, get a little bit better, get more familiar with how the ladder works, what things are good, what things are bad, and it'll help me with team building in the future, so I know what to watch out for. Again, like I said, it's gonna be pretty low on the ladder. Don't expect anything amazing from me. I like to mess around and team build more than I like to predict my opponents. But it is what it is, and thanks all for watching, and I will see you next time.